experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis. This isn't just a reading of the text, it is a generated dialogue designed to unpack dense ideas and make them usable for you. So today we are tackling a topic that, it feels like it belongs in a summer blockbuster trailer. We are talking about courage, and I think we all have this very specific image in our heads, right? The hero, jaw set, charging into battle.
Absolutely no fear in their eyes.
Exactly, it's the action movie standard. But here's the hook that really got me for this deep dive. What if that picture, that idea of fearlessness, is actually wrong?
What if it's a bad thing?
Yes, what if it's a bad thing?
It's a provocative start.
Yeah.
But that's exactly where we need to begin. Today we are analyzing essay number 19 from the Syntopicon Mortimer Adler's massive index of the great ideas. And Adler makes a very critical, very sharp distinction right at the top of the essay. He argues there's a massive canyon between being courageous and just not being scared.
Which, to be fair, sounds like splitting hairs at first.
It does.
For me, and probably for you listening, brave and not scared are basically synonyms. If I'm not scared of the spider, I'm brave about the spider. Why does the essay say they aren't the same thing?
Well, let's look at the mechanics of not being afraid. Why might someone lack fear? They could just be unaware of the danger. That's pure ignorance.
Okay.
Or they might be insensitive, literally incapable of feeling the threat. Adler has a great example. A toddler wanders into traffic. They aren't afraid.
But we wouldn't call that courage?
No, we'd call it ignorance.
Right. You don't get a medal for walking into a fire because you didn't know it was hot.
Exactly. The essay defines courage specifically as the mastery of fear, not its absence.
The mastery of it.
And that's a crucial distinction. To be courageous, three things have to happen. First, you have to recognize the danger. Second, you have to feel the appropriate level of fear.
Because fear is the signal that something is wrong.
It's the biological signal, yes. And third, and this is the real kicker, you have to choose to act anyway.
So fear isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature.
It is.
You actually need the fear to validate the courage.
Precisely. If there's no fear to overcome, there's no internal struggle. And without that struggle, there's no virtue in the action. It's just an event.
That's actually incredibly validating. It makes the virtue feel accessible. You don't have to be a robot to be brave. But let's get into the architecture of this idea. Adler loves his frameworks, and he leans heavily on the Greeks here. How does he categorize this struggle?
He spends a significant part of the essay on Aristotle, specifically from the Nicomachean Ethics, books 3 and 4. And Aristotle gives us this famous framework of the mean. He sees almost every virtue as a middle ground, a balance point between two extremes.
The Goldilocks zone of ethics.
That is a fair way to put it. Not too hot, not too cold.
So for courage, what are the cliffs you can fall off?
On one side, you have a deficiency of confidence and an excess of fear. We all know what that is.
Yeah.
Cowardice. You're paralyzed by the threat.
Okay, that's the obvious one. What's the other extreme?
This is the one we often mistake for bravery. On the other side, you have an excess of confidence and a deficiency of fear. Aristotle calls this rashness, foolhardiness.
So the guy who jumps off a roof on a dare because he thinks he's invincible.
He's not brave, he's rash. The essay is very clear here. The rash person is failing to respect reality. They aren't calculating the risk, they're ignoring it. The courageous person, the one in that Aristotelian mean, stands in the middle. They see the height, they respect gravity, they feel the vertigo. They'd only jump if there was a compelling, noble reason.
Like saving a life.
Right, not just for the thrill or the ego.
It all comes down to the why, doesn't it? The rash person acts for the thrill. The brave person acts for the good.
It's always about the why and the how.
Yeah.
Adler also groups courage with two other big virtues in the essay, temperance and justice. And the comparison with temperance is, well, it's fascinating because structurally they're opposites.
Opposites how? Aren't they both just about self-control?
They are, but the direction of that control is different. And this is a point I think is really useful for understanding human behavior. Think about what temperance does. Temperance is about resisting. It's saying no to seductive pleasures.
Food, drink, comfort.
All for the sake of a greater good. It's resisting the pull towards something you want.
Okay, so temperance is, I really want that second donut, but I'm skipping it to be healthy. It's braking power.
Exactly. It's the brakes. Now, courage is the accelerator. Courage is about enduring the repulsion of pains. It's facing things that push you away, hardship, suffering, danger, and moving towards them for a greater good.
I see. So temperance is resisting the carrot, and courage is facing the stick.
That's a brilliant way to summarize it. But think about the difficulty. Temperance is hard because pleasure is seductive. But courage is arguably harder because every fiber of your biology is screaming at you to run away from pain. Adler notes this makes courage a self-regarding virtue in many ways. It orders your own internal state so you can function.
So if you can't withstand hardship, if you have no courage, you're just trapped. You can't pursue anything difficult.
It's the engine that keeps you moving when the road gets rough.
I want to shift gears to the historical timeline here. The essay tracks how this idea evolved over 2,000 years. Because when we start with the Greeks' Aristotle, Plato, they were mostly talking about guys with spears, right?
The battlefield virtue, yes. The early focus in the essay is very much on the state and the soldier. Adler brings up Plato's dialogues, the Laches and the Republic. But Plato does something interesting. He elevates courage from just swinging a sword to something intellectual.
He views it as a form of knowledge.
Almost, yes. A form of knowledge.
Knowledge. That seems counterintuitive. I think of courage as a gut feeling or heart. How is it knowledge?
For Plato, it is the knowledge of value. He argues that the truly courageous person, like the guardians in his ideal republic, must know what is truly to be feared and what isn't.
Let me guess. Death is not the thing to be feared.
Correct. For Plato, physical death is inevitable. It's neutral. The things you should actually be afraid of are dishonor, evil, betraying your principles.
So courage is the wisdom to keep your priorities straight when the heat is on.
It's knowing that losing your integrity is worse than losing your life.
That is an incredibly high bar. It feels a little elitist, doesn't it? Like only philosopher kings can be truly brave because only they know the truth. What about the regular person?
A valid critique, and it's actually where the history takes a major turn in the essay. We move from the Greeks to the medieval period, and specifically to Thomas Aquinas.
And this is where we see the democratization of courage.
That's the word for it. It becomes available to the masses.
How so?
Aquinas reinterprets courage through the lens of Christian faith. He takes it off the battlefield and puts it into the soul of the believer. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about the martyr.
The person who dies for their faith. But how is that different from the Spartan dying for Sparta?
The difference is in the agency and the method. The Spartan fights back physically. The martyr endures. Aquinas described it as sacrificing one's life for the sake of true life.
Which meant a peasant, a mother, a monk.
They could be just as courageous as any warrior. It became about spiritual stamina, maintaining your integrity and faith under persecution without necessarily lifting a weapon.
That is a huge shift. It moves courage from physical prowess to inner strength.
You can be courageous while sitting perfectly still.
It internalizes the battlefield.
And that opened the door for courage to be a virtue for everyone, not just the military class.
Speaking of taking time to reflect on these big ideas, we want to mention Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's really about inspiring reflection and rational thought.
It is a great resource if you're looking to cut through the noise. We often talk about information overload, and having a place that synthesizes these massive topics into something manageable it's incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. So if you are enjoying this deep dive, definitely check out Mindful Moments. But getting back to the essay, we have the Greeks and the Christians. But Adler brings up a really sticky problem, a paradox that I think about a lot. The Nazi soldier problem.
This is one of the most intellectually stimulating parts of the essay. It forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Can a villain be courageous?
Can a villain be courageous? Yes.
Right. Picture a soldier fighting for a regime we all agree is evil, say, in World War II. He is terrified, bullets are flying, but he charges that hill to save his squad. Functionally, he's doing everything we just defined as courage, mastering fear, facing death. Is he brave?
Adler outlines this fierce debate. On one side, you have the strict Aristotelian view. Aristotle would look at the mechanics of the action. Did he feel fear? Yes. Did he master it? Yes. Did he act for a goal he perceived as noble, like saving his friends?
Yes. So functionally, yes, that's courage.
From a purely mechanical standpoint, yes.
But that feels wrong, doesn't it? Calling that soldier courageous feels like a compliment. It feels like we are validating their cause.
And if you can use courage to do something horrific, is it really a virtue?
Exactly.
And that is where the Platonic and Stoic view pushes back. They argue for the unity of virtues.
The unity of virtues, meaning you can't just pick and choose.
Exactly. They argue virtues are a package deal. You can't chop them up. For them, if you lack justice, If your cause is fundamentally unjust, you cannot truly have courage.
So what is the soldier doing in their eyes? If it's not courage, what is it?
The Platonists would say he's just being rash or stubborn,
Exactly.
or that his bravery is a counterfeit.
Like fool's gold.
Exactly. Because he's ignorant of the true good, his action is hollow. It looks like courage from the outside, but because the moral foundation is rotten, the virtue isn't real.
That is a tough one. It feels a little bit like semantics redefining the word so we don't have to praise bad people, but I see the point. If courage is a virtue and virtues are always good, then you can't use it for evil.
Precisely. It prevents the concept of virtuous evil. Adler doesn't give us a definitive answer. He lets that tension sit there. But as we move into the modern era in the essay, the focus shifts again. We stop worrying as much about the physical battlefield and start looking at moral courage.
This is the era of Immanuel Kant, right? The Enlightenment.
Yes, the essay touches on Kant's perpetual peace. The battlefield becomes the political arena. We start seeing the concept of the courage of dissent.
Standing against the crowd.
Or standing against your own government. Adler notes that in the modern world, it might actually take more courage to oppose a war than to fight in one.
That is a powerful idea, because in the army, you have your squad, you have orders, social approval, you have a support system.
But the whistleblower, the person advocating for nonviolence when everyone wants blood.
They're completely alone.
And they face a different kind of pain. Not a bullet, but social ostracization, ridicule, imprisonment, the loss of their career. That requires a massive amount of that inner fortitude we talked about.
It's the willingness to be an outcast for the sake of truth. So what does this all mean for us? Because, look, most of our listeners aren't fighting in a trench, and hopefully they aren't political whistleblowers. We're just trying to get through the work week. How does Adler bring this home to the individual?
This is where I think the essay becomes most relevant to the modern listener. Adler uses a specific example that I just love. The student.
The student, as in someone literally sitting in a library.
Yes. Think about the act of learning. Real learning is hard. The essay classifies the difficulties of study as pains.
Mm-hmm.
There is mental fatigue, the frustration of not understanding a concept. There is confusion.
And the social cost, the FOMO fear of missing out because you're in the library while your friends are out.
Exactly. Adler argues that staring at a textbook when you would rather be anywhere else is a form of suffering. And therefore, sticking with that difficult subject for the sake of a long-term good knowledge, self-improvement, is a genuine act of courage. It is fortitude.
That's so validating for anyone trying to learn a language or get a degree or even just read a dense essay. We don't usually pat ourselves on the back and say, I was brave today because I finished that chapter.
But we should. It's the mastery of the impulse to quit. It's mastering the impulse to choose comfort over growth. And this connects to Adler's final big point in the essay about self-realization.
How so?
Think of courage as the bridge. You might have the wisdom to know what you should do. You might have the desire to be a better person. But without courage, without the ability to endure the discomfort of change and effort, you will never actually do it.
You're just trapped by your immediate comfort.
Exactly.
Wow. So courage is the virtue that makes all the other virtues possible.
It is.
You can't be just if you are too scared of conflict, to be fair. You can't be temperate if you are too weak to say no.
Exactly. It is the engine of the moral life. Without the engine, the car doesn't move, no matter how good the steering wheel is.
That puts a whole new spin on it. It's not just about heroics, it's about capacity. It's about having the nerve to become who you are capable of being.
And that leads to a question I want to leave with the listener based on this essay. We often look at the problems in our world or even in our own lives and we think, if only we were smarter, if only I had more data.
We think it's a knowledge problem. We think we're missing a puzzle piece.
Right. But if courage is the bridge between knowing and doing, is it possible that our failures aren't failures of intelligence, but failures of nerve?
Do we already know what we need to do? Quit the job, start the project, have that difficult conversation, but we just lack the courage to endure the pain of doing it.
That is something to chew on. Are we not smart enough, or are we just not brave enough?
We have covered a lot of ground today, from Aristotle's golden mean to the bravery of the library. If you want to dig deeper, click the link on screen for more on this and other essay subjects. Please subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.